So, welcome to the second RSGS Teach Meet. Our topic this time, as you can see, is the broad general education phase of the curriculum. Thank you for joining us. Our first presenter is Lynn Robertson from Education Scotland on the new skills progression framework. So.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me along to this RSGS Teach Meet. My name is Lynn Robertson and I'm the Senior Education Officer for Social Studies for Education Scotland, and I'm here to talk to you this evening about the new skills progression framework for social studies. So first of all, why did we decide to do it? Well, I think we're all aware that social studies as a curriculum area is a very content-heavy area of the curriculum, and that there are many different contexts across all three organisers that children and young people can learn about right through their broad general education from early to fourth. Indeed, the range of contexts is so wide that they may well never repeat a topic. Therefore, assessing their progress only by content makes it difficult to assess how they're progressing. So this document, looking at skills, was designed to help with that progression. So now I'd like to take you through how we did it. The advice is based on the experiences and outcomes and the benchmarks, as all Education Scotland advice has to be. We identified the skills that appear in the experiences and outcomes and the benchmarks. And we did use these skills to bridge the gaps that we have in our experiences and outcomes to try to make showing progression a little bit easier. We also tried to find commonality between the three organisers in terms of the skills, because I know that many of you teach in a single teacher delivery model in broad general education, and it would be much easier if it was one set of skills across the three organisers. However, after a great deal of work, it was clear that we had to recognise the differences. So while some skills are common across the three organisers, there are some skills that are specific to a particular organiser. Now, I think there's a couple of things to add that are super important. The first thing is that content is still important. We know that our young people, when they get to national qualifications, will be expected to learn and write about in their exams examples of which they'll have to know considerable detail. So, content should still be assessed, because we want to know that they're learning and we want to emphasise to them that they need to learn in order to succeed in their national qualifications. The second thing is that this document is for advice and guidance only. If you are happy with the assessment of young people's progress in your department, then this document is not for you. But if you are thinking of doing a skills progression framework and you haven't had time, you haven't got around to it yet, then this document is a starter for 10, and use it as you wish, use bits of it as you wish and adjust it to your own particular school circumstances. But it is for advice and guidance only. Finally, exemplification. There was hot debate amongst the people who responded to the consultation about whether exemplification was actually needed. As a result, I have decided to do some exemplification of the document, and that will probably be available next summer, just based on capacity issues here. But again, it will be a separate document that will complement this one. So if you'd like to use it, you can, but you don't have to. It'll be available for you to use. So where can you find this document? Well, you can find it currently on the Professional Learning Community for Social Studies on Glow, and I've put the address on the screen. It will ultimately appear on the National Improvement Hub, but there is a strict limit at the moment as to what can go on the hub because of the COVID circumstances. So it's going to appear here on the Glow area for social studies. Please do have a look at it if you get a chance. Finally, thank you very much for having me along. My email address is on the screen. If you'd like to have a chat about this document in particular, or about any aspect of learning, teaching, assessment and moderation for social studies, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you again, and good evening.
Okay, so thank you, Lynn, for putting that together. Are you around? Are you here to answer any questions or queries people may have about the document?
Absolutely, Alastair. I will just say I had the first of my root canal treatments today, so if I'm not quite as smiley as usual, it's because the numbing is starting to wear off. So I'll do my best.
It's starting to wear off. That's good. Okay, we'll bear that in mind. Can I just welcome as well Sarah Wilson from Peebles High. She is hopefully monitoring the chat today, so she's going to be maybe putting some questions to you. Sarah, are you around?
I am. Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
So how was it, Sarah? Anything being asked?
Nothing apart from Lynn saying that she sounds like a newsreader because she went to drama school and it never leaves her. That was pretty cool. But no questions as such.
Okay, does anyone have anything even verbally that they'd like to ask Lynn about the document or about anything really? Root canal treatment if you want.
Don't bash heads with your dog. That's
Can I just ask then, Lynn?
Yes.
Previously, when we had documents, what followed was the sort of the benchmarks. When you mentioned in your presentation about exemplification, is that the kind of thing do you mean, or do you mean like examples from schools of what they're doing?
Actually, kind of examples of topics that, I mean, we're not allowed to provide sample assessments, for example, but I think it would be useful sometimes to see the kind of context that we mean when we talk about things. So although there's no suggestion those contexts are the ones you would use, it is sometimes nice just to see how it would look with exemplification. I think the benchmarks are useful up to a point, but I think for us in social studies, I don't know how much easier they have made assessment. I think when we first got them, there was a feeling they were going to really help. But as I've been going around the country in the past couple of years, there was definitely a need for something else. So the exemplification will actually take each of the skills and exemplify how it can be assessed.
Okay. And just,
how do you access the learning community on Glow? I have social studies as one of my tiles on my waffle. If you go in and search, I think there's an Education Scotland bit on Glow and you can search social studies, but that link actually takes you straight there. The link on the presentation will take you directly to the right place. You'll have to sign into Glow first, but it should then take you directly into Glow. There's no sign of the benchmarks changing at the moment, but there's a lot of discussion going on, partly because of the OECD report that's due to come out next year, and also because of the protected characteristics. So looking at Black history and LGBT+, I will try to do that. Yes, I'll put that link on. So there may be, there's whisperings of some changes at Education Scotland to benchmarks and possibly to E's and O's, but we wait to hear. I don't know where we are with that at the moment. There's been a really strong push from the curricular SEOs that this is not the time to be changing. We really don't have the energy in the profession to be making major changes. So hopefully that message will have gotten through. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there was anything imminent, so we should carry on planning as we are. Anything that would happen with the protected characteristics would be tiny tweaks. They wouldn't be anything major. So, but yeah, I shall put that link on for you as soon as we're on to the next film.
Okay, and just to clarify the timeline on all of this, so the framework's currently available on Glow. You said it's going to be available on the Education Scotland website as well, is it? Or yes,
it is. There's a real at the moment our organisation is being very strict about what is allowed to go onto the National Improvement Hub, and it's basically Scotland Learns materials and not very much else. But as soon as they lift that embargo, then I will get it put onto the hub, and I'll let you know when that is as well, because it's much more accessible to people if it's on the National Improvement Hub than on Go. So I apologise for that at the moment, but I wanted to get it out because it was ready. I didn't want to sit on it, so it was better to actually get it out.
Okay, that's great, Lynn. Thank you very much. If anyone else wants to ask anything of Lynn in the chat, then feel free to add that. But I think we'll move on to our next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So second, this is a presentation from Eleanor Stevenson, who teaches at Mackey Academy. We're taking you outside for this one. No.
Hi, my name's Eleanor Stevenson and I've been working as a geography teacher for 20 years. In that time, one concept that I find that children forget a lot is where the different lines of latitude is. This is something I've used with first years, I've used it with third years, but I've also used it with primary schools when I go out to visit out there. It's a really simple concept and I have some friends to help me do it today. So, when we do this, we imagine that our whole body is the world, and we point to where we think the North Pole is on the world. Then we point to where we think the South Pole is. Then we work out where the equator is, so that's in the middle of the Earth, that's where we find the rainforest. Then we talk about deserts, which are the tropics, the Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Capricorn, which is round about Venice. And the last one is where the polar bears live. Can anybody remember its name? Arctic Circle. Well done. So, girls, can you tell everybody what's the song that we know that would go with pointing to the north and the tropics and the south?
Head, shoulders, knees and toes.
So we're going to sing it. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1.
North, Cancer, Capricorn, South. Capricorn, South. North, Cancer, Capricorn, South. Capricorn, South.
And
Arctic Circle, Equator. North, Cancer, Capricorn, South.
Capricorn South. Well done. Get yourself around the applause, girls.
Fantastic. As you can see, I'm mixing these videos up a little bit. We're going from sort of development and then onto actual specific things that can be done. Ellen, that was brilliant. Really good idea. Sarah, is there anything on the chat that people are asking about Ellen?
There's a whole lot of love for it. We're very, very enamoured of that. I don't see any questions as such. Elaine says she's going to do it tomorrow, though, so that'll do.
I have to say, since I heard this video earlier, I've already used this in class, and it works really, really well. Eleanor, can I ask, do you have anything else like that on a similar vein that you find works well?
Not quite as catchy as head, shoulders, knees and toes, but I do have, Alistair asked me this before, so I have had thinking time. I do something with third years to try and remember the basics of a choree. Now, it doesn't cover everything, but I always find, like, you'll notice when I'm talking, I use my hands a lot, so I think that I try and get kids to use their hands. And when I teach about a choree, when I'm telling them the kind of basics to try and get them to remember it, I always start with saying snowfalls, snowfalls, and then over time, and I'm like, it's not snowfalls and compacts, and over time more snow will fall and it will compact, and then I make sure that we work out where northeast is, and so we point to northeast. You've got to imagine we're pointing in the right direction, and then I'm like, in a northeast facing hollow, and I bring my hands up like this. So before they know it, they're all doing snowfalls and compacts in a northeast facing hollow. So everything, it's not any kind of official sign language in any kind of way, but it gives them something tangible that they can remember. And then when you do that, you can say, well, what happens at the back? And you have a little action for plucking. And then you say, what's abrasion? Because you've taught them that, and they're like, well, it's the rubbing. So you go, oh, abrasion, but you move your hands down because it's at the bottom of the hollow. And then you're like, what happens next? Oh, there's some lovely rotational movement. And we do miss out feedstock. It is BGE. I'm trying to make sure they've got two very solid understands of the processes, and then we get them to form their little armchair hollow in their hands. And then when you do it, if you give them a little test or a little assessment, you see them doing this. And then they go and write it. So I think anything like that can help them. But the north-south, the head, shoulders, knees and toes, I had third years doing it the other week, and even the boys that sit in their tracksuits glaring at me, they still all stood up and they still all did it. And it helps them remember, because for some of them, particularly those that are going on to do National 3 or National 4, they really struggle with these kind of basics. And I think if we can get the basics in it's quite good for them. But yeah.
Brilliant. I think like you say, watching them do that in an actual test afterwards as well is lovely. So yeah, great ideas.
And I don't know about any of you, when I teach them about weather and anticyclones and depressions and wind direction, I get them to put their finger on the map and move it in the direction it's going, so they can see where the wind is coming from rather than imagine it. And you still get them in their prelims. If you peak, you can see them putting their finger on the map and going round and working out where the wind is coming from. And that's far better than them doing it in their head.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, Eleanor, thank you so much. Can I also, while you're here, can I also just thank you for everything you put out on Jog Mackie on the Twitter account. It's a regular port of call for me, so I would highly recommend your Twitter for good ideas.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So moving on then. Our next video.
Hi.
Our next video is, so this is from Stuart Kennedy, who teaches at Elgin High School. And so we're now going back to putting BGE courses together. So this is how he puts his broad general education course together at Elgin High School.
Hello. I'd like to say thanks to the RSGS for inviting me back to talk again. And I'm going to talk briefly about how I've gone about planning my geography curriculum at Elgin High School, and not just integrating the ESNOs and benchmarks and thinking ahead to the unit assessments in terms of transition, but also how I can use the Sustainable Development Goals as a way of sort of packaging up the curriculum in offer. And the first thing really is just a little bit about myself. I've been teaching for 20 years, most of that being in the northeast of Scotland, but I've taught different curricula and seen different ways in which how that's planned, and I always got the feeling that it was kind of ad hoc and that things were really dealt with tweaks and personal favourites. I also felt there was a little bit about it more being the curriculum was controlled by competition, doing certain things at certain times or certain activities which don't necessarily always fit in with what the subject looks like later on, and what I'm beginning to think more is about creating an experience that's more representative of what happens within their senior phase, and doing that within my BGE. I'd certainly say that since CFE arrived, I've gone through a series of actual false dawns, and I've made lots of mistakes since August 2012, and I don't confess to have things right even now. But what I do feel is that, I'm beginning to understand more 20 years later about learning and about how we build knowledge coherently. And I've taken the opportunity of this being my third PT position since 2006 to actually make a fresh start and to really sort of rethink what is it I'm trying to achieve and trying to offer. And the thing I needed more than anything else was I needed an overview. And I sat down one day and just pulled out the E's and O's, matched them up to the benchmark, matched them up to the unit assessment, so that what I had was a big picture overview, which let me see whether the curriculum was as coherent as I thought it was, and I don't think it is. It let me saw that there was a lot of conflicts in there. I felt that the curriculum increasingly more was about knowledge. You know, that some of the benchmarks and the E's and O's had a transition, a slider between one and the other, but then other ones didn't. You know, particularly some of the fourth level outcomes, you know, they don't really have a corresponding third one, which makes it really difficult to make an assessment decision on. Which is why I would rely on using the National 4 or the National 3 if I had to, unit assessment to make that decision. Because, you know, I'm trying to create a transition from my BGE into my senior phase and not a sharp shock. And with my department, I sat down and you know, the first thing I wanted and made clear was I didn't want it just to be about topics, but I wanted it to have an inquiry question. So you can see here, I've got single teacher delivery, social studies teachers, history, modern studies, geography, all teaching the same topics. We're at the point in the school where there's not really any sort of main integration as such, but it's very much geography topics, history topics, modern studies topics, and so on. So at the moment, you know, with the focus on it having a research question, for example, how did the Ice Age affect Scotland? I didn't want the topic to just be about the Ice Age or glaciation or Scotland. I wanted to ask and for pupils to be able to answer a specific question. So with that one, you know, again, we're looking at the physical geography of Scotland, the how Ice Ages form. But then also looking at, well, how do we use these landscapes? How does Scotland use them, and what conflicts are created? So very much begin to think ahead to the nationals within first year. In S2, you know, we expand that. We've got more topics. Well, basically, I think it's no different to what other folk have done in terms of putting it together. I'm trying to remember what I said in the second bit now. Basically, it ends up just showing how I've mapped it out to suit what I'm wanting the kids to be able to do. And you know, I really am just using it from my Nat 5 experience and how I've created the stuff. And a lot of you have seen the stuff that I've been putting on from SAG anyway, and so I've got half an idea of what I'm doing. Alien Attack, Margaret, is, instead of doing a map skills unit, it was an idea that I shamelessly stole. But I came across it one day, and it teaches map work through a series of challenges. So it's based on a fictitious alien attack, and the first bit is the continents and oceans and where it goes from there. And then they've landed, and it introduced like choropleth mapping, because you start looking at they've spread a disease is spread, and it was all like COVID. I sort of second guessed COVID was going to happen, but yeah, it's basically just teaching map skills, but actually just giving them a task to do, like little code breaking tasks and all sorts. So it's just that.
Oh, that sounds good.
Oh, the rivers and flooding unit there, Elaine. Aye, that one is quite good. I think it needs a tweak though. I don't think it quite worked as well as I'd have liked it to. The first half was okay. I think the second half needed a change. Competition, yeah. So I think that comes from I guess back in the old days, certainly. All the schools I worked in up until fairly recently, it was all about, oh, we have to do this topic at this time, and we're gonna get them to do this big arty crafty project because that gets them in. And I kind of just felt, no, those arty crafty things are good, but I don't want to spend a week or a fortnight building volcanoes and exploding them in class when I could actually be delivering something a bit better than that. And they could do that at home and that would be okay. But I just kind of felt that, you know, we had to do a bit of entertaining to get kids in was maybe the wrong thing, and that actually you're being entertaining by actually delivering some really good stuff in front of them. I think it's just maybe where I've worked in the past that comes from. So. Yeah, I think everyone is. I'm guilty of hooking kids in the past of doing stuff like that. I've just decided to stop doing that for just now. He's gone, isn't he? He's not. Is Alastair back?
I saw him for a minute, but then he seems to have gone again.
Yeah. So I think the idea of like doing the challenges, like I'm doing my climate change one at the moment with second years, and that's going down a storm. And I think you know, that also comes from you know, at the moment being on this bit of a treadmill developing stuff, and then sort of once you've done it and you take a step back and you realize, oh wait a minute, I've pitched this wrong, or I've pitched this too low, or usually in my case I've ended up pitching it too high, and then having the chance to go and look at it again. So my climate change unit, when I originally wrote it, was just mental, but then I had a re-look at it again, and you know, I think it's pitched it absolutely spot on with that. I think the climate change unit is on Saget. It should be. I'm pretty quick at sticking stuff on. I've not finished yet, but Patrick Walker, he produced a climate change unit for a BGE, and I'm going to shamelessly take his assessment for that. I thought it was really good. I liked that. I liked how he pulled that together. So if you see Patrick's one, his assessment's a nice one. I like it. Where did I find the time for the development? I don't know. I don't know is the answer. I go through fits and waves with it, really. And I think it's just, I think like all of us, you know, you start off, you magpie loads of stuff, and you know, you end up with hard drives full of stuff, and then you just realize that actually most of it you're never going to look at again. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's great, Patrick. Honestly, it's good. I like it. It's really, really good. Alien Attack, Eleanor, yes, because it's on Saget, but I think Emma Clark was really quick when she was like resorting the hard drive out. So I'm not sure if the files got split or not. I think it's all back together in one place now, but you'll find it in the BGE folder. It's in there. But yeah, I think the thing that I always found like really bamboozling, and I kind of missed a wee bit of what Lynn said there, was just the you know, the achievement of a level and things like that, and then you know, what actually quantifies achievement. You know, loads of kids can produce work at levels 3 and 4, and when you look at the booklets, you know, like integrating the benchmarks into it. If anyone's seen the rivers one, oh no, wait, sorry. I wrote one on the Ice Age because my single teacher delivery there, you know, I sort of tried to put in here, you know, achieve a benchmark, tasks within it. So it was only focusing on 2 benchmarks, but it was, you know, to get them to realize, you know, they can label a diagram, they can, God forbid, give a 4-figure grid reference, you know, and if they're able to apply that, then yeah, that's them working perhaps at level 3 for the map skills part. But yeah, that's putting that spreadsheet together sort of just helped me work out in between, you know, I think like Lynn was saying that the benchmarks are, you know, there's obviously thoughts about them, but I put that together a couple of years ago, and it was basically me trying to find the middle ground between well, if National 3 says this and Level 3 says that, you know, well, where's a kid at really? Because they, you know, they might not achieve the benchmark, but they might have produced what would be National 3. So that's kind of where I was at with my thinking. Purely to try and just keep it simple for me at the moment, because I'm really just taking the view that whatever topic I'm working on, you know, I'm looking at what do they need to be able to do at National 5 and working backwards from that, and using my own experience there as a marker, as a teacher, to do that rather than treat Level 4 as something separate with separate topics to do. I'm trying to just keep everything together. The third year course really sort of matches the setup of the nationals. Is still very topic based, and this is an area that we're still undergoing and still wanting to review. The course itself works. Again, it ties in with various different sustainable development goals, but as a curriculum at the moment, I think this will need to be revised and based on what we're doing within S2. When you look at the whole thing there, you can sort of see just how we're sort of beginning to start off really broad, not covering too much to begin with, but then ramping up the complexity and the content. One of the things that I'm really pleased with is how we're using the Sustainable Development Goals within them. All the units have the SDG marked for whatever corresponding SDG it is on the front cover, and then within the booklet itself, I'm using booklets rather than PowerPoints or individual sheets because I feel that it helps to package things up more easily for me. Is each booklet will have a lesson that ties in with the Sustainable Development Goals. So in this case, SDG number 13, taking climate action, and the task here is that there's over these 2 pages and pages beyond that have various strategies to solve or reduce the impacts of climate change. One of the things I really like about the different take we've gone for is rather than have a glossary at the end of the booklet, we've included the glossary sort of as we go. But the task here is based on having reviewed the evidence for climate change, reviewed what the solutions that could be put in place are. You know, we're given the task of creating a Google Doodle based on World Earth Day and using the information that's on the page and whatever they found for their own research. For the assessment for this topic, this would be beginning to model an AVU rather than doing a class test. So I hope that's been useful. I hope that gives you a sort of flavour of what we're doing. Happy to take questions later on. But as a shameless plug, give us a follow on Twitter. Thanks very much. Bye.
Okay, Stuart, thank you for that. And I'm really sorry about interrupting your video halfway through there.
That's all right.
You may have answered any questions, but Sarah, you've been here and you know what's been said. Are there any questions that haven't yet been answered?
There's one or two, yep.
Yeah, go for it.
I asked one about did you share your spreadsheet as well? Because that's serious there.
Yes, it is on the Saget Drive. Off the top of my head, I can't remember where, but I think it's under. It says like E&O benchmark N345. I think it's like the folder it's in, and it's in. I think it's in the BGE folder. But it is there.
Cool. I'll have a look because that's the kind of thing that I've been thinking that I would like to do for like is a strong word, but thought it would be good to do for a while. But yeah. Great. Angus is asking, what's the feeling with the benchmarks from Education Scotland versus the outcomes from SQA? Did you feel there was consistency in terms of level with these parallel outcomes and benchmarks, especially when planning like this for junior phase? I've stuck with level 3 and 4 outcomes and benchmarks for planning and assessment in the junior phase. And whilst acutely aware of the standards and outcomes, I wonder if you felt you gained any further insight having done this.
Well, I think straight off the bat is that there isn't the consistency really. I mean, take the climate change one, for example, and maybe this has just been really too literal with it. But, you know, the climate change doesn't appear below the 4th level. Yeah. So, you know, for you know, and I think there was the way in which that was organized, that, you know, you're progressing from 3 to 4. So I just kind of felt that there wasn't that consistency between levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, because we got loads of kids coming up now that are clearly still working at level 1, some of them, you know, but I'm not going to deny them that knowledge, that opportunity to do it. When planning through, I don't think I've got it, the answer right at all, with it, because because what you have to do to pass at national is in some cases easier than what it is to pass the level benchmark. You know, there's less demand put on it. Certainly when you look at national 4 and the level 4, sometimes the level 3 stuff is what is asked for at national 4. And it comes back to in my last school was when it was about achievement of a level. You know, at what point do you say a kid has achieved it? Is it 50% of the outcomes, or is it 60 or 70 or 90? You know, it was really, really confusing. And I still don't get it. You know, all these years later on, I still don't understand it. And so I've almost kind of given up a wee bit in trying to make sense and just simply saying, well, this is what they're working at and this is where they should be going. Have they achieved any of it yet? Not sure.
Okay, thanks. Lynn sort of half answered your the question there, saying there's never an intention to make National 4 and Level 4 the same.
No.
The E's and O's were written long before the national qualifications, and
right.
The benchmarks were based on the E's and O's.
And I think that's where the mismatch, the disjoint between SQA and Education Scotland, and how we've got this really baffling curriculum, really, with that respect.
Yeah.
I agree, and as teachers, what we're trying to do is do the best for the kids in front of us, and trying to make things, you know, get into the best order that we get to, and it's not easy.
No. Yeah, I'll just see a question there about time, how much time's allocated.
Yeah.
Currently 3 periods a week, 50 minutes each in S1, and then unbelievably, we get 2 periods per subject in S2, which is why my S2 is a bit rammed with stuff. In my last school, it was 3 periods a week and it was integrated social subjects. But at Elgin High, they've gone 2 periods per subject, a single teacher delivery, which is like bonus. I'll take that. Thank you very much. So, you know, I also recognize I get way more time than I would otherwise.
Okay, are we happy to move on?
There's one more question that's come in directed at Lynn, but I'm sure Lynn's seen that, which is about the you know, continuation of the collaborative working between Education Scotland and SQA. Oh, there we go. Nope.
No, I think that's just the thing, though, that just, you know, when you're trying to produce something that's progressive, you know, building up through the years, that we've kind of got ourselves, like, I'm old, so like 5 to 14, you know, standard grade, you know, but then actually nobody ever told me about had they achieved level C or level D, or, you know, nobody really seemed that bothered about it. But then all of a sudden, have they achieved this level meant that you had to jump through these hoops to say, well, look, I've got this outcome in this one and this one and this one, you know, before I could then say, oh, they're working at level 4, and the level 4 outcomes were all different in sometimes. So yeah, I am still totally confused by it all, even now, but I'm just carrying on.
And that's all you can do, Stuart. Just carrying on.
Yep.
Well, please keep carrying on putting resources on the SAGT Facebook site because
it'll come to an end eventually.
I think across Scotland, geography teachers are very appreciative of all the stuff you put out there. So thank you very much for that.
You.
Right, I think we'll move on. Our next presentation. Our next presentation is from Geraldine at Dollar Academy. And this is how she gets pupils out into the school grounds.
Hi. The activity that I'm going to share with you today is one that we do with our second years as part of the Weather and Climate unit. And the reason that I like this activity is that it involves the pupils going outside and working in groups. You don't need any equipment for this, and also it's quite good because it can lead into an assessed piece of work. We get the pupils to write a report that explains where they think the best location for a weather station would be in their school grounds. Before we start this activity, we talk about the different elements that make up the weather and the different instruments that are used to measure each element. And we also try and give them a sort of visual idea of what a traditional weather station looks like. And we talk about all the different conditions that are important for each of the weather stations to give accurate results. And that helps them to then come in and start this activity. So when we come in and start the activity, the first thing that we get them to do is get into groups of maybe 3 or 4. And then in their groups, we ask them to try and come up with a list of at least 5 criteria that would be important in setting up a weather station. So they usually come up with things like surface. So they talk about the fact that grass would be better than tarmac, or they might mention that it's easily accessible to the geography department because things need to be checked often. They might talk about it being away from artificial heat sources so that the thermometer is accurate, or being out of the way so it doesn't get knocked over. So they come up with a list of at least 5 criteria. And once they've done that, we would ask them to decide on about 5 potential sites and mark them on the map. We would give them a map as part of the school grounds and ask them to decide where they think would be possibly good locations. So they mark it on the map and then they go out in their groups and they assess each site on their criteria. So we tell them 5 is the best, 0 is the worst. And for each site they have to go and they go through their criteria and they give each location a score. Once they come back into the classroom, we talk to them about the fact that they're going to use their results to write a report that explains which location they chose and why they chose this location. So we ask them to include the map of all the different locations. We also ask them to draw a graph that will be included as well. And we give them examples of the different types of graphs that they could use. And then they also need to talk about the different factors, and most importantly for us, they need to explain why these factors are important. We found that it's best to give them an extra period in class to start off to make sure that everybody in the group has got the results and to maybe start them doing the graph so that we know that they're on the right lines. But after that, we get them to finish at home, and this just makes up one of the assessed pieces of work. So I hope you find that useful. Bye.
Right, thank you very much. Jill, are you around? Are you available?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, thank you for putting that together. Sarah, is there anything for Jill?
Nothing on the chat just now. I am interested in that because we do a similar thing with our S3s. Because we do it for where they would put an outdoor seating area, which is ironically very topical now that all the kids are shoved outside every break time. So I'm interested to see how you designed that and how it compares to ours. It's given me a few extra things. Lisa is asking, will the weather report be available on Saget?
Yeah, I can put it up there.
Okay.
So how do you do your outdoor seating one? Is it similar?
It's similar. We get them to actually do some measurements as well. So we have like infrared cameras, and they measure the winds and look at aspects and shelter and so on. So we do kind of field sketching and basic data gathering. It's, you know, it's not accurate in any way, but it gives them the experience of doing it, and then collating and graphing the results as well. So it's kind of a similar idea, but just, yeah, with a bit more data involved, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, I think anything really that gets people's outside in the current circumstances is probably beneficial. So thank you very much for sharing that. Right, we will move on. And our next one. So this is Stephen Mackenzie. Stephen Mackenzie's actually a modern studies teacher, but please don't hold that against him. He's not actually. He's from Environment Community High School. He's not actually able to join us tonight, so please don't post any questions for this one. But I think the presentation itself is very, very useful. So just to say thank you to Stephen for allowing us to use this video.
A very short clip explaining the steps in the process that the Environment Community High School Social Subjects faculty have followed in the redevelopment of our broad general education curriculum. Now, Education Scotland's cycle of moderation really guides our thinking and gives us direction in planning and evolving the curriculum. But many of us find it easier to refer to this as the learning, teaching and assessment cycle. And as I say, it does guide our thinking on this and give us a bit of structure to how we're looking at our courses. The very first thing that the faculty did was we sat down and we looked at our course rationale. We were quite honest with ourselves at this stage and had to make some tough decisions about what we were actually going to be delivering. Rather than teaching things that we'd always taught just because we enjoyed teaching them, we had to go back to the experiences and outcomes and decide what context would be best suited to our S1, 2 and 3 courses. One way we did this was literally cutting up the experiences and outcomes, grouping them together into potential topics that would suit our learners. Once we had our course rationales in place, we looked at how we were going to make assessment judgments, and that involved engaging in the benchmarks, which of course have been recently published. What we found really helpful was the key messages of what to do and what to avoid. And a massive thing that came out from our engagement in this document and discussion around it was that the benchmarks were really there as guidance. They're used to support our judgments in the way that they give us information about the level of responses and skills, in our case at level 3 and at level 4. Not something to be individually assessed or tracked or ticked off. It does give us a lot of scope and support in making our judgments. So we had our course rationale and we knew how we were going to make assessment judgments. So we grouped them together and it would come out something like this. So for example, in a Modern Studies S3 course, we now have a pressure group unit. And you can see they're drawn from the experiences and outcomes at level 3 and at level 4. Then the assessment judgments are inspired by the benchmarks. And again, level 3 and level 4, what's really important here is the level 3 skill being describe and the level 4 skill being analysis. So we have the pressure group rationale being drawn from the experiences and outcomes, and the types of assessment judgments that we're going to be making inspired by the descriptions in these benchmark statements, describing and analysing. Once we had our context for courses and our assessments, we then looked at the types of skills that we wanted to develop throughout S1 to S3. So we went right back and had a look at the Curriculum for Excellence's 4 capacities, thinking about how do we actually develop responsible citizens through our courses, and what kind of context should we be bringing in to ensure that our learners are getting an opportunity to develop their communication skills as effective contributors, confident individuals, and successful learners. Also, we really had a long think about how we would improve our learners' skills for the national qualifications, how we can make our BGE better articulate and feed into our senior courses at national. As well as that, we thought about the types of skills that our learners are going to need in order to be successful in the workplace. And finally, we considered the guidance from Building the Curriculum 1 about how we have a responsibility to deliver literacy, numeracy and health and wellbeing. An example of how this would come out is in modern studies, we identified a national qualification skill where we want to develop learners' abilities to use a range of sources of information to make and justify decisions. This is drawn from a national qualification inquiry skill in modern studies. And that would link quite nicely to a level 3 literacy benchmark where they select key information and link in ideas from more than one source. So this is something that didn't exist in our broad general education before. So we started to develop questions and lessons that would allow learners to do these two things in S1 and in S2. And then as we move on, we're using the level 4 benchmarks in literacy and progressing that skill. So we had our context for our courses. We knew how we were going to make assessment judgments. We identified the skills that we were looking to progress throughout the 3 years. Then we had to think about the actual lessons and the types of assessment that we were going to put in place. We started off with a vision statement, a statement for change in the department. We knew that we had engaged in lessons. We knew that our senior phase was going well. What we weren't confident about was the assessment judgments that we're making in the BGE. So we started off with these two statements. First, to create lessons which will allow students to continue to be engaged and informed, but also be prepared and motivated within the senior phase. Then, to create assessments and assessment strategies which would allow students to improve. This was the area in particular where we felt our BGE would have to be developed. We also took into consideration a lot of work that had been going on in the environment around about improving learning and teaching pedagogy, particularly through the Tapestry programme that we've been using for formative assessment strategies. We distilled this to the 6 main assets of learning and teaching: students taking ownership of their learning, developing positive classroom ethos, really being clear on what the purpose of the learning is that's taking place, having a variety of different teaching approaches and methodologies, developing the use of questioning to advance learning, and ensuring that we had appropriate pace and challenge in our lessons. We also considered interventions for equity, ensuring that all the lessons that were developed took into account the use of data, were promoting quality learning experiences for everyone. And we came up with this. This was our success criteria for lessons, units, and assessments. We generated this as a department, and the idea was that it would be something that would be used when we split off into smaller groups or as individuals to develop lessons. We could self-assess our new lessons against it, and we can come back together to ensure that our new course reflected what we set out to do. So after we had our success criteria, we went on to discuss how we were going to support the assessment judgments that we're going to have to make. One of the ways we decided to do this was to use a system of what we call assessment grids. So you can see an example here from Modern Studies, where we have a pressure group assessment task. We've identified a benchmark statement, which is going to be that describe at level 3, analyse at level 4. Also got a literacy benchmark, which links to the task that they're doing, not necessarily the Modern Studies knowledge. We've got a decontextualised learning intention, which is all about researching and then presenting the evidence in a structured way. To help learners to make assessment judgments themselves and to support their identification of where they are in their learning, what their next steps are, we split the success criteria up into these horizontal grids. So you can see here the level 3 describing skill again, and at level 4 evaluating. Once learners had used these grids to make and support their judgments, we then enter these reflections and judgments into progress. Final stage, to ensure that we were having a good spread of assessments across our BGE, was to formalise it in our lesson plans. We've identified on this screen here week 1 to 31, we're not holding people to that. We still want to have fluidity and be able to be flexible, depending on the teacher, needs of the students in the class. But we did want to identify a way of ensuring pace. Things in the BGE previously were drifting and taking multiple lessons, which was a way of tightening that up. As well as that, for assessment opportunities, to ensure we were having a good spread of assessments taking place throughout the year, not just happening at the end of units. We mapped them out on our lesson plans. It's also allowed us to see at a glance where we having a wide range of different assessments rather than just assessments of one type. Finally, and this was one of the most important things, we created some space and time within the departments to check back in with each other as we developed things. As I mentioned earlier on, we've created the success criteria for lessons, units and assessments. As teachers went off to develop schemes of work, they would come back to the department, explain their thinking behind the lessons, ensuring portability, that other people could deliver the lessons, and that they fit the criteria that we'd set out in the previous meeting. Once we've been through that cycle once, we go back to the start, and the way we see this is it's a never-ending process where we're continually evaluating our lessons, making every effort to improve them as we go.
Okay, so hopefully some of that was useful and informative. Sarah, any comments at all?
Nope, I think folk were taking your instructions not to give questions very seriously.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's there for you, and I think what he said was really very helpful. So I think we'll move on. Our next one is Patrick Walker, who teaches at Turnbull High School. Can I just check? Is Patrick online at the moment? Okay. He apologized. It's actually his girlfriend's birthday today, so he had hoped that he would be able to make it, but perhaps not. And I think that's maybe.
I've made it. I've just given her a cake, so we should be quiet for a couple of minutes.
Okay, excellent, Patrick. I'm really glad you could join us. So I'm just going to play your video, and then if people have questions, they can ask you afterwards. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Hi there. I thought this would be a good opportunity to share with you BBC bite-sized content for level 3 and level 4 geography. So with school closures and lockdown, the BBC were quite keen to get some more guides on their website, and thankfully they've focused on geography as well. So to share my screen with you to give you a couple of examples of what they've been doing. If you were just to Google and look up BBC bite-sized people, place and environment, it will take you to this landing page. I've been doing some of the level 3 and level 4 stuff, so to look at the level 3, these are the sort of guides that are available just now. There is one more guide as well to come, which is going to focus on weather, climate, and also the sort of biomes and animals which adapt in those environments. So hopefully that one should be posted any day now. Just to give you a sort of rough overview for our map skills then. So basically here it's a hopefully sort of one-stop shop for everything that pupils need to be aware of for map skills, different types of maps that can be used, and then there's a sort of checklist here of the different things that they would need to know. Every page then on this guide just takes them through these different sections. For example, we've got here compass points. Page 4 then is the grid references, and at the bottom of some of the pages as well are some questions for pupils to attempt. So for example, for grid references here, they can read that information and then they can see if they can have a go, and that reveals an answer for them as well. So all these different pages then take them through some basic map skills. I'd also sort of raised the point with the people at BBC that when we sort of do map stuff, it's also about interpreting maps as well. So thankfully, hopefully, managed to get some other information on here too. So we've got 4 different types of maps and the data it shows. So starting with Coral Clef, and then there's some questions down at the bottom here. So they can use this map here and then also sort of use the map at the bottom to answer some questions with the answer down below. The second map in this one here then is Eyes Aligned to sort of start to try and introduce weather ideas. And again, you've got a question just down below there too. Map 3 then is a sort of, again, linking in before this sort of dot maps. And then the last map here, the last guide, is proportional symbols as well. So a range of different maps, hopefully to sort of be able to allow pupils to interpret too. Going back to sort of the main guide, again, data and graphs, so we've got climate graphs and pie charts there, so it sort of follows a similar theme to our maps. And then our weather and climate information down here. For the weather in the UK, so I've started to try and introduce some themes from the Nat 5 weather topics. So you can see we've got information here about air masses, and for each one of these, there is a sort of question down below as well, which reveals the answer. Second page then goes on to talk about your isobars again, linking into before. We've also got attempted low pressure and depressions, with questions down below, and then we also have as well anticyclones and high pressure here too. So the level 4 information sort of follows a similar theme. It's just more the questions which sort of hopefully have been differentiated to try and challenge the pupils a wee bit more. So that's what we have so far. Again, sort of like I say, hopefully in the very near future, because I was told and hopefully it would be available, but I think we've just ran out of time. There should be a third guide down here, which links in weather, climate, and different biomes and animals and plants from around the world too. So hopefully you can find this useful, can try and use it with classes. Kind of thinking as well was potentially like kind of homework guides as well, providing the link for pupils, and they can then read some of the guides and answer some of the questions as well. So I hope that's useful. Please feel free to share with anybody else who could utilise this resource too. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Right, Patrick, thank you very much. They look brilliant. I'm really looking forward to kind of having a look through and seeing all that's in there. I presume that one that you mentioned, has that now been added?
Yeah, do you know, it's actually quite funny because about 2 days afterwards, I got an email from the guy at the BBC to say that the most recent one is now live as well. So there's another guide for rainforests, deserts, and also the tundra regions too. So they're all now added as well, linking in the animals and people and the sort of general characteristics and climate as well.
Excellent, good. Sarah, anything in the chat?
Just a lot of love. Folk are loving the idea of this. Folk are also loving that they're seeing people's names and hearing people's voices from Twitter as well. And they're hoping they get the spelling of deserts right this time. That would be useful. Tan's asking that Bite Size, she wasn't aware that Bite Size had done BGE pages. She's asking if they've been around for a while or is this a new thing?
I'm not actually overly sure about that. I think it's sort of hidden somewhat because it is sort of under the people, place and environment heading. So I think if we were to sort of say search Bite Size level 3 geography, there might not be much there. So it is sort of the kind of secret, if you like, is to be searching for the Bite Size people, place and environment as well. I think sort of from speaking to the person at BBC, he was saying that the English curriculum was really quite far ahead with it, and the sort of Scottish stuff was lacking slightly. So they were looking to sort of just try and put more of a balance in play for that, which is why they've sort of been allowed to produce a few more guides as well. He'd actually just said as well recently that he's happy to put more geography content up there, and he sort of said if we had any ideas of what we wanted to do, then yeah, he'd be happy to sort of push that forward as well. So if there's any sort of topics or themes that we'd like as a BBC Bite Size guide for level 3 and 4, I can sort of feed that back to him if you've got any ideas or suggestions, sort of based on some common themes that we all teach maybe.
How's the best way to contact you, Patrick? Just through the Facebook group or? Yeah,
Facebook group's probably grand, yeah. If that's sort of easily accessible for everybody, yeah, that would be fine, yeah.
Angus is asking if there's any scope for advanced higher materials, because he's pretty sure they don't do currently for any subjects, but it might be good for some new materials if they would produce that.
Yeah, I can sort of most certainly sort of feed that back to him, because I sort of did say that I would be sort of presenting and launching, if you like, the sort of level 3 stuff tonight on this. So he was sort of quite keen just to hear everybody's thoughts and like the idea of being promoted So yeah, I can sort of say to him as well, is there sort of scope to think at the other end and sort of see what he thinks to that as well, potentially.
Eleanor's also saying she'd like some Mediterranean or monsoon to be added to the weather and climate.
Yeah. I can ask.
Just an idea, you know. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
is that really good? Oh, could use some extra ones. That would be nice.
Yeah. Because yeah, like I say, sort of, he is quite willing to sort of have a few more guides. So even if we wanted to build together sort of, I don't know, like a sort of country case study or something, if that was sort of appealing to people, or if we sort of wanted, I guess if we wanted things added to other ones as well, there might be sort of scope for that type of thing. But he was very open with to suggestions, and sort of said, because I think he'd sort of thought that the map skills one was sort of one that he really wanted, and he also talked about weather and climate as well, and so I sort of pushed for sort of, as we've been saying over the course of the evening, that we're sort of interlinking different bits and pieces. It's not maybe just weather and climate on its own, but it's maybe reflecting that in terms of maybe an empty land or what it's like in Scotland. So it maybe wasn't quite as straightforward as here's a climate graph or something along those lines. So he really is quite open to sort of any feedback and suggestions we have, because I think ultimately it is sort of there for us and the pupils. So yeah, the best way we can use it would be ideal.
Right, Patrick, thank you so much. And if there's there's climate change there on there as an idea as well. So I would put things out on the SAGT Facebook site as well, and get ideas on there and promote this as widely as possible. And that tip about searching for people in place rather than geography is probably very useful.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll let you get back.
Hi there.
Right, and that's us. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. This video, if possible, a recording of this will be made available as soon as possible, if you want to have a look back at any of it. Our next Teach Meet we're scheduling in, I think, for March 2021, and we'll be in touch with details of what that will be like. So thank you very much.